these both, and then whichever one works. Get that. Okay. Yep. All right. So, why don't we start today on page 345. So go ahead and open the book, 345. Now, what are we talking about? What are our two categories for today?
Function questions and inference questions.
Good, right. So those are essentially the detail, vocab, and global questions that we learned prior, and taken a step further. So instead of just asking, what is this, what is it that's there, as in what's referenced in the line, is asking why is that particular detail there? Why was that passage written? Okay, so that's why I have this in green for you guys, because the function and the inference are the harder ones. They're the why questions, which is actually the ones that are teaching you the comprehension, not the other ones. The other ones just ask whether or not you've read the passage. So, one more time for the class, what is our method for reading comp?
Actively read the passage, taking notes as you go. Number one. Number two, examine the question stem, looking for clues.
Good.
Number three, predict the answer and select the choice that best matches your prediction.
Right, finally.
And number four, long passages, passage first.
Great. Thank you. Next page. We're talking about function questions. Okay? What does the first box say?
Focus on.
Alright, so if we're talking about function questions, remember guys, this stuff's all online, so if you haven't read it yet, you're a little behind, but I'll give it to you anyways. Function questions focus on the purpose of a given detail. Like I said, these questions are basically detail and vocab taken a step further and asking why is it there, okay? The next box.
Remember that.
So in order to answer what the function of a question is, this box is what do you have to do? Well, you have to try and answer it from the author's perspective. As in, if I were the author and I wrote this, why did I include this? What function does it serve? How does it help me? All those kinds of things. Okay, and the last box?
Ask about the purpose of.
So just like detail questions, they'll ask about the purpose of those same details. So lines, particular words, maybe even entire paragraphs. But once you get to global, entire passages, then we're talking about inference. So right now we're sticking to the smaller things. Okay, so once it's all filled out, let's move on to the passage. And could you please read the passage for us?
It is hypothesized that sleep serves some crucial function to the nervous system, but amazingly enough, scientists have not yet discovered what that function is. Sleep eludes effective study, in part because it is so difficult to observe sleep from the inside. That is, while one is actually doing it. Psychologists have found, however, that they can study sleep from the outside by measuring the electrical activity of a brain while its owner is asleep. This has led to much interesting data, though the best interpretation of this information is still debated. During sleep, for example, researchers have found recurring patterns of electrical activity that seem to indicate discrete stages of sleep. However, the function of these stages is still far from clear.
Great, thank you. So, passage, simple, right? Let's talk about, before we go to the actual questions, let's talk about the passage itself. What does A ask? Part A, what does it ask?
Well, they're asking about
What's the actual question?
sleep eludes effective study.
No, well, okay, so the question is, what is the topic of this passage?
Sleep.
Right, sleep, studying sleep. Good.
Studying sleep.
Right. What does B ask? Below the passage, there's A and B. What does B ask?
What's the purpose of this passage?
Okay, so what is the purpose of this passage?
Well, how to study sleep.
Okay, close. So it is talking about studying sleep and various issues with studying sleep. Now, he brings up these issues for a purpose. That purpose is to describe why it is difficult to study sleep. So the purpose of this particular passage is to talk about the difficulties of studying sleep study, however you want to phrase that. Okay? Now, next page. Number 1, what does it ask?
The second sentence of the paragraph, lines 4 to 6, functions primarily as.
So, again, our method here is read the question, looking for the clues. What's our clue? The line reference, right?
Line
Good.
reference.
So
Okay.
we use the line reference and we say, well, okay, he said they quoted, or they gave us lines 4 through 6. Now we go back and we read lines 4 through 6. In this case, can you read us the part where it starts? Sleep eludes effective study.
Sleep eludes effective study in part because it is so difficult to observe sleep from the inside. That is, while one is actually doing it.
Okay, thank you. So that's the sentence we're talking about. Now the question is, basically, why is it there? What's the function of that particular sentence? Well, if you weren't paying attention, or our minds are elsewhere, then we would say, oh, well, he's just telling us that sleep is difficult to study. But that doesn't help us because that's not one of the points here. Our issue is we need to see how it relates to the rest of the passage. And in this case, before we make a prediction, we just ask ourselves, how does this relate back to the passage? Well, if you look at the first sentence, it says, it is hypothesized that sleep serves some crucial function, blah, 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 but amazingly enough, scientists have not yet discovered what that function is. He then goes on to say, sleep eludes effective study, in part because it's so difficult to study from the inside, blah, blah, blah. So what is he doing there? He's putting forward basically his argument that sleep is hard to study. He then brings up in the next sentence, lines 4 through 6, one reason why it is difficult to study. In this case, because it's from the inside. So if I were to make a prediction, it would be something like, well, maybe support, right? He's supporting something that he previously said, as in the first sentence of the paragraph. So then we can do our verb sweeps and say, okay, is he rebutting anything? No. Is it a possible explanation? Yeah, it could be. Is it a solution to a problem? No. Is it a statement that the author later